I'm in med school and I finish studying at 1 p.m. every day. It shocks a lot of people to hear that and they automatically assume I'm smart and they can't do it. But this video won't be useful if you don't believe it's possible for you too. It took me a whole year to learn the lessons that got me to this point, and today I'm going to be sharing them with you. What I'm going to say is unconventional, it might sound crazy, but the results speak for themselves. Don't take notes. When I'm advising people, it's always tough to get them to accept this because they think that's how a person learns. That's what we're taught in school. That's what we imagine when we think somebody's studying. But my argument is that you can study faster without taking notes. Let's imagine you and I are sitting beside each other and we start studying the same lecture. The text says something that's hard or confusing, so you start taking notes. But I accept that I don't understand it right now, and instead of writing notes, I continue reading the lecture. As I move on, the lecture explains itself and adds the details we needed to understand it. You're having to split your attention between actually reading and taking notes, but I'm reading and actively thinking about the lecture. I don't spend that time putting my thoughts on paper. I'm moving my brain instead of the pencil, and it's much faster. In my mind, I'm keeping a vague understanding of what the lecture has already said, and I focus on connecting new ideas as they come. I learned right alongside you with less effort and probably finished faster because I didn't have to take notes. But this hasn't convinced you to stop taking notes yet because I haven't told you how to remember the material. And to answer that, you first need to understand how to approach learning. One day, a pottery teacher divided her class into two groups. She told one group that they had to make one pot every day for 30 days, and the other group had to spend all 30 of those days working on just one pot. At the end of those 30 days, she found that the highest quality pots came from the students who made one pot every day, not the students who were aiming for one singular perfection. So it's the repetition that creates better quality, and that applies to everything. If you want to get better at shooting the ball, keep practicing that shot. If you want to get better at making videos, keep making them, just like I'm doing right now. But I don't see a lot of people applying that to studying very often. I pass through each lecture 2 to 4 times. On my first pass, I go through the lecture fast, under an hour if I can. I just want to understand the big picture. I don't try to memorize anything, and if I don't get a detail, I move on. That should sound familiar because that was you and me reading that lecture in the beginning. Then 2 days later, I'll come back for my second pass. I'm not going to reread the text because there's a lot of unnecessary details. Instead, I'll listen to the professor's lecture because they're going to highlight what actually matters. As I'm listening, I'm refreshing my older understanding and I'm fitting in new pieces. This time, I'm focusing on the high-yield concepts and I'm letting the unimportant details fade. That's not a bad thing. Your brain has limits and tests don't reward memorizing every detail. The fact of the matter is, you didn't need those details to answer that one question right. Sometimes professors write practice questions and that's as high yield as it gets. They wrote those questions with a concept in mind that they really wanted you to know. I'll do them, I'll get them wrong, but that's the point. I'm learning. It forces my brain to go through the incorrect logic, then I fix it. It's a very active learning process and it leads to better retention. 1 week later, I'll go through my third pass and everything starts to click. By this point, I've already learned the overarching concept and didn't have to take a single note because I trusted my brain to understand it. And I gave it time to retain some of the details that I may not have thought I could remember in the first or second pass. I've also gone through the whole week's lectures twice, so I have all that as context to help me understand the third pass. So now when I reread the dense lecture, it's a bunch of fluff words or explanations that I can just skim my eyes over to find the details that are giving me trouble or the thing I need to memorize. But how are we going to memorize those details if I told you not to take any notes? Well, the hard truth is there is no single fit-all method for memorization. You need a toolbox of strategies that you can switch between depending on what you're learning. I'll share 4 tools that I use all the time, and once you know which one to use and when, your studying gets way faster and your retention stays amazing. Let's say you're learning the multiplication table. Your goal is pure recall. You don't need to understand the relationships, you just need instant answers. Flashcards or Anki are perfect tools for that. Same goes for anatomy. Trapezius, pectoralis minor, sartorius, these are straight memorization. But, and this is the key, don't waste time making your own flashcards. That's just fancy note-taking. Use a pre-made deck or find a better tool. Now take something like glycolysis. It's also simple memorization, but flashcards don't work well here. They'll train your brain to remember isolated steps. You'll know step 1 and step 7, but you forget everything in between. That's why the glorified Anki doesn't work for everything. I just had to throw some shade in there, man. I hate Anki. Instead, the best tool here is your brain. I'll think my way through as much of the pathway as I remember, then I'll fill in what I missed. I'll keep repeating that and that locks it into my brain. Then we have the tough ones like diseases or pharmacology. These have so many details that, I'm not gonna lie, I couldn't memorize listing them all off. Like symptoms, mechanisms, drugs, side effects, contraindications. It's really hard and inefficient to try to memorize all that through brute force. That's why the best tool here is a visual. You can group everything together in one picture or flowchart. There's lots of outside resources that have already made pictures for you, but sometimes there are none, so I found it extremely helpful and efficient for me to make my own drawings. They don't take much time at all because they're ugly, but they're super memorable. I also create my own flowcharts that I visualize on the exam. Like this one right here covered 3 to 4 lectures. The time to output ratio is amazing, and all of it is active learning. I'm building these myself. The last tool is this or this. They're the same thing. I write questions for the things I forget. On my third pass, I knew what multiple endocrine neoplasm was, but I forgot the mutated protein, which is an important detail because it was one of the questions on my second pass. I also knew it was important for me to memorize the 3 Ps because I needed them to answer multiple questions. Now, I agree some people might count these tools as notes, but the focus here isn't to map out the whole lecture. I'm using tools to target the exact things that I need to memorize or differentiate between. And that's what the third pass comes down to. It's a pretty easy read through where you're not trying to relearn everything. You're just filling in small gaps and using your tools to memorize a few details. At this point, I hope I've convinced you to stop taking notes because you'll trust your brain to remember the big concepts through the multiple passes, and you'll memorize the details by using the right tools. Now, there's one more thing that tells me to go enjoy my day, close shop at 1 p.m., and that's a beautiful schedule. You need to make it because you can't finish studying if you don't know when to stop. And it answers the most important question. Am I on track to finish and review everything before my exam? Without it, you'll always feel like there's more to do. And that's how people end up studying all day without actually getting more done. I plan med school week by week. It takes less than 10 minutes. I list every lecture I need to cover for that week. Then each day I know exactly what has to get done. For example, say it's Saturday, we'll say October 4th. I have 3 new lectures and 3 to review. I know I have until 1 p.m. to finish them. That deadline keeps me focused and it stops me from getting bogged down on one hard lecture or obsessing over a single confusing slide. You gotta be comfortable not understanding everything right away. You'll see that same concept again, whether that's in the other lectures or sometime before your exam. And even if you don't understand it, the time that you would have wasted trying to master that one tiny detail could have been used to learn more high yield material. It'll feel uncomfortable at first, but trust the process. You'll study less, but you'll learn more. Rich people are looting hospitals and leaving the poor to suffer. Click this video right here to see how they do it, and click right here to subscribe. Giant thank you to my friends who got me to this point. I wouldn't have been able to get the luxury of finishing at 1 p.m. if it wasn't for them, for their advice, for the schedule they gave me, for the techniques. I appreciate you guys. I can't say your name, but you know who you are. I thank you so, so much. Genuinely, it changed my life. Genuinely, bro. Thank you. Thank you.